مشاهدينا مرحبا بكم في حوارات السياق. شهدت الأيام الماضية توترات متزايدة بين إيران وأفغانستان وسط نزاع حول حقوق المياه، والتي تخللتها اشتباكات حدودية أسفرت عن مقتل جنديين إيرانيين وأحد الحراس من حركة طالبان. عموما للمزيد من المتابعة حول هذا الملف تنضم إلينا الدكتورة نيلوفر ساخي، زميل أقدم في مركز جنوب آسيا التابع للمجلس الأطلسي. دكتورة نيلوفر، مرحبا بك معنا.
Thank you for having me.
دكتورة، انتهى اختلاف الأسبوع الماضي بين طالبان وإيران، لكن هل انتهت المشكلة؟
Well, I don't think so. The tension between Iran and Afghanistan over the flow of Helmand River water, it has been, it has a history actually. It's not new by its nature. It has a history. This water conflict existed between the two countries during the Republic and even before that. Though there is a treaty already, there's a 1973 treaty, the Afghan-Iranian Helmand River Water Treaty, and there's a framework seems to be in place, but both the countries failed to do managing the water and also resolving the conflict which arise from the water, which used to arise from the water in different period of time. So I don't think so. It's the end of the story, as it says, it's the beginning, and it will continue until there is both the technical issues are not taken care of, and the political issues underlying this water flow is not resolved. So this is the beginning, actually, not the end of the conflict yet.
كيف يمكنك توصيف العلاقات الحالية بين إيران وطالبان؟
Well, Taliban-Iran relationship has been very shaky since 1990s. Both Taliban and Iran were about to go to war actually during 90s when Taliban were first in power, and the issues were immense. It was the conflict were mainly due to the ideological differences, of course, but also the fact that the two countries, the two parties, the Taliban and Iran, were never agreed on some security framework for the borders. Even at that time, and the second time when the Taliban in power now. So the relationship has been shaky since 1990s, but Tehran actually supported Taliban at some point by providing them weaponry support. And also at this particular time, in the recent time, and it means from last 3 years, Tehran supported Taliban in different platforms. Tehran gave actually platform to the Taliban soon after the Doha agreement was signed, and Mullah Brother was invited in Tehran by the high delegations, welcomed by Tehran. So the relationship seemed to be fine before this particular conflict, water conflict. And Iran was a supporter, and Taliban, on the other hand, looking at Iran as a road path, as a path towards governance, because of the ideological similarities in the shape of the being strictly Islamic, both the countries, and implementing Sharia law, especially Taliban. They used to see Iran as a guideline for their governance in Afghanistan. I'm talking about the recent time. But this particular conflict, and there were other, by the way, there were a couple of other conflicts also over the border from last 2 years between the two parties, between Iran and the Taliban authorities in the border areas. So the border issues were there, and there are two reasons behind that. First, I think there's a technical reasons behind this border conflict, because Taliban lack capabilities and abilities to manage borders, and this border conflict is not only with Iran, it's with Tajikistan, it's with Pakistan, it's with most of the neighboring countries. So Taliban lack that regulatory framework in order to manage border conflict and crisis. That's why it gave rise to the border issues again and again with different countries in the region, especially with Iran as well. In the term of, and the underlying issues are drug trafficking, human trafficking. They are actually the causes that give rise to the border conflict. And on the other hand, there are political reasons too. The two parties seems to demonstrate power, demonstrate force, and Iran want to show that, well, it can manage security well, and it cannot let Taliban to cross any limits at the border. And on the other hand, Taliban want to demonstrate the same, that they are sovereign, they can protect their borders, and they are there, they can enforce by force any mechanism that they have. So it's demonstration of power from both ends, which makes sometimes the diplomatic engagement hard to process, because both try to talk and negotiate and discuss from the position of power. And from many other cases from around the world, we see that when the parties discuss from position of power, and they don't negotiate well, and the negotiation fail at the end. So that's a power demonstration also from both the parties. And on the other hand, there are differences, of course, ideologically as well between the two parties. Iran is a Shia majority country, and Taliban are a Sunni majority group, Sunni group actually by nature, and they are enforcing Sunni sect in the country. So there are also kind of ideological differences which relates to Shia versus Sunni, and that is not really prominent at this stage, but that is one of the underlying ideological issue between the two parties that was there, because Afghanistan has a Shia community and Shia population that Iran think it's a guardian and protector of that Shia population in Afghanistan. So that issue has been always there as well, and has something to do with the relations and dynamics between the two parties.
وزير الخارجية الإيراني قال إن بلاده لا تعترف بحكم طالبان. لماذا باعتقادك؟
Well, Taliban-led Afghanistan is a security threat to the regional countries, to all the neighboring countries. I mean, with the Taliban takeover, different other insurgent groups and transnational terrorist groups got inspired in the region. And we have seen there are a number of cases, stories, and facts and data about this other jihadist groups or transnational terrorist groups who had organized themselves both in Afghanistan and also in the region. So that is a threat. The Taliban-led Afghanistan could pose a serious threat to these neighboring countries. Now we see with the border crisis, we see with them actually giving sanctuary and shelter to those small transnational terrorist groups in Afghanistan. And because, I mean, Taliban, let's not forget, Taliban is a militant jihadist group, and their networks are with this other transnational jihadist group. So it's very difficult for Taliban to cut ties with those transnational terrorist groups, from where they get their support, from where they get their technical, financial, and leadership support. So that is actually naive to think that they cut ties with all those transnational terrorist groups. So by foundation, that is a problem for the regional countries, for Iran, for all the Central Asian states, that their ties with those transnational terrorist groups could pose serious threats to them, because that could provide, Afghanistan could provide sanctuary, and whenever there's time ripe, those could pose threats to these countries, particularly Iran as well. So that's one of the major issue that the regional countries have in terms of not recognizing the Taliban. And Iran has mentioned that several times in different diplomatic statements that they released from last 2 years almost. The second issue is the domestic crisis in Afghanistan. There is lack of a good governance in Afghanistan. There is small insurgencies in Afghanistan right now. There is one dominant group, Taliban, in power dominantly from one ethnic group, dominantly from one religious sect, and the other don't see themselves in politics, don't see themselves in the future of their countries, the other ethnic groups, the other religious sects. So that by itself create an internal crisis, conflict in Afghanistan, and that could give rise to civil war at some point if these issues are not resolved, to be honest. Therefore, the Iran think that is the domestic crisis could go beyond borders. And that beyond border means the countries in the region, anyone, and Iran also, Iran part of the eastern part of Iran will get impacted or affected by that internal security and internal insecurities in Afghanistan. So that is also one. So the internal domestic problems, political issues in Afghanistan, that worries, that concerns Iran, and that therefore Iran in several occasions asked for inclusive government, that bring all the parties together, let's make an inclusive government. And Iran has recently in one of the Central Asian events, Iran was very clear about that. So the countries in the region, particularly Iran, thinks that an inclusive government that all see themselves in power, that could resolve some of the domestic crisis, and that domestic crisis will bring a stability, and that stability could be an advantage of Iran. And therefore, I think at this point, the recognition is an issue because inclusive government is not placed, because protection of women rights and human rights is really not promised and not executed. And on the other hand, the most important factor is the ties of the Taliban with transitional terrorist group has concerned everyone in the region, particularly Iran as well.
دكتورة، هل مشكلة المياه بين البلدين قابلة للحل والتي فاقمها التغير المناخي؟
Well, I think it is, I think it is resolvable. I think every conflict has a resolution path. But as I mentioned, it's the border conflict between Iran and Afghanistan is not new. It's not related to last 2 years of the Taliban time. It goes beyond that. Even during Republic, the water issues, water diplomacy was not happening well. Even during Republic, the water conflict was not giving priority in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the time. So this issue has always been underestimated. I mean, though it's a security, for me, I see border conflict as a security issue. It can escalate into a very into an armed conflict, and that armed conflict can really undermine the security of the two countries and also go beyond the region if it's not controlled on appropriate time. So this is a security issue, but it's unfortunate that different rulers of the time did not take that as a serious, did not give it a serious consideration from 1973 onwards. So that, yes, that is resolvable. I have been hearing water experts of both the countries arguing about the technical path in order to distribute the water equally in light of the the climate change and the drought which both the countries are facing. So the water experts are providing extremely accurate ways of going towards the resolution. But again, as I mentioned, there are political issues that prevents sometimes the resolution of such conflict. And I think I did highlight some at the beginning that parties positioning themselves from a position of power and negotiating, doing the diplomacy from the position of power, that I have all these resources, I can do better, so you can give me more. That is the positioning of power and negotiating from position of power, I think, will not help the resolution to happen. But if there's an interest-based negotiation, both parties can sit at the table and bring experts, to be honest, because right now I see that both countries lack technical expertise. They don't bring in that political discussion those technical expertise. So the technical experts should be at the table of negotiations in order to find a path for the resolution. That could be a merge of the technical and political table in order to lead towards a resolution of this particular conflict. So that's possible, yes, but if it's taken serious, if it's not event-based, if the parties will not leave it now and then they will come back whenever this year conflict emerge, they try to work on it consistently and bringing more experts at the table in order to find a resolution for it.
هل من مصلحة طالبان استعداء أحد جيرانها في ظروفها الاقتصادية الحالية؟
There is no time for conflict with any country. I mean, if Afghanistan doesn't have that, is not in a position to create any kind of conflict with the regional countries. Why? Because you're right. Afghanistan, first of all, needs financial support. Afghanistan needs technical support also, and its human resource. and many other areas. So yes, Tehran has a lot of leverage right now. Tehran can close the borders. That will impact the flow of goods to Afghanistan. Tehran can return the refugees back to Afghanistan. Tehran can, Tehran has a lot of leverage. The list goes on and on. So therefore, I think some compromises at the table of negotiations should happen. And that compromises Afghanistan if the diplomatic team, whoever will be, and that I don't actually believe that Taliban have good diplomacy, or they can follow good diplomacy, because they are not a political party, they are a militant group. And that's why there's a problem always with their negotiation with the regional countries, because they don't have the tactics, the tools of the diplomacy in order to negotiate with the countries about different issues. So, but Afghanistan overall, let's consider Afghanistan as a party. So Afghanistan as a whole should take this negotiation seriously, and there should be some compromises happen at the table of negotiation from both the parties going forward, because you're right, Tehran has a lot of leverage at this point.
لماذا يبدو وكأن العالم تناسى ما يحدث في أفغانستان؟ غابت مأساتها عن عناوين الأخبار الرئيسة.
There were lots and lots of mistakes happen in the past, and the first and foremost tragedy is a group like Taliban being in power in Afghanistan. That's a tragedy for Afghanistan, and that is a tragedy for a democratic free world, to be honest. So that by itself is a problem right now. We have, the reality is that a militant group, a militant extremist group is in power. So therefore, most of the news actually don't come from Afghanistan, because Taliban suppressions does not allow groups to talk, does not allow free media to happen in Afghanistan. So you don't see many news coming from Afghanistan in terms of the violation of women's rights, human rights, detention of journalists. So all this news that comes, they are either through a secret ways of that media have followed from last 2 years. But internally, we don't, of course, most of us who have our contacts in Afghanistan, we hear a lot of those news, but in media inside, there's not a lot of that happening because of the Taliban strict rules on the freedom of expression, on people to freely express their views and report. So that's not happening in Afghanistan right now. Overall, internationally, there are voices, Afghan voices, and also Afghan friends who raise the issues related to the security crisis, the traditional security, non-traditional security crisis, human rights crisis, and particular women rights crisis, which you know that women are banned from education and they are not allowed to go to school and work. So it's kind of it is a gender apartheid for in Afghanistan right now, imposed by the Taliban. So those are happening, but you're right, not at the extent that every one of us are hoping to happen, because this is a country under serious security, internal security, and a security threat to the region and beyond. And I myself, I have written a lot on this, highlighting the facts and the reports from last 2 years, where I try to demonstrate and show that how Taliban continuation could cause serious security threat to the region and to the West as well, especially because of two factors. First, because they lack capabilities of governing. So they cannot govern a country. So lack of governance, lack of proper governance, good governance could create internal security crisis. People will rise, the small insurgencies will happen around the country, and that will not let a country to go towards stability. So that's one thing. And then there's external factors where Taliban link and connection with all the other transnational terrorist groups and jihadist groups could prevent the security to happen in the region. And it could affect and impact the West going forward. And the most important, the refugee crisis, the drug trafficking, they are all adding to the list that we have seen have increased since the Taliban takeover. So there are issues, there are serious security, hard security issues that emerged since last 2 years. And I think the world should pay attention to it, should not underestimate the security crisis, because it will impact the entire global peace at some point if it's not tackled well.
دكتورة نيلوفر، شكرا جزيلا لك للمشاركة معنا في حوارات السياق.
Thank you for having me.
مشاهدينا، شكرا على طيب المتابعة. إلى الملتقى.